Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Pitt Street Uniting Church and to the launch of Suzanne Leal's new novel, The Watchful Wife. As we gather, we acknowledge the original custodians of this place and all First Nations people in our communities. We grieve the unjust loss of their lands and waterways taken without consent or compensation. From their beginnings, the Spirit of God has dwelled with the first peoples of this ancient land. We acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, pay our respects to their elders past and present, and commit ourselves to walk for just reconciliation. I would like to introduce you to Jane Palfreyman, who is the Allen Unwin commissioning publisher for The Watchful Wife. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, and welcome everyone tonight. On behalf of Suzanne and Allen Unwin, it's lovely to see so many people here in this really magnificent church. I'd like to echo my respects to the traditional custodians of the land. As always, it has been an honour and a pleasure to publish Suzanne, and now that the book is out in the world, I look forward to seeing the reactions of readers to this provocative and intriguing novel about love, faith, loyalty and belief, as well as having the kind of page-turning appeal that keeps readers on the edge of their seats. The Watchful Wife poses some serious and very timely questions around topics that appear almost daily in our headlines these days. Perfect for book clubs, yes, but also questions that I keep returning to, which I know others will as well. Congratulations, Suzanne, for writing such a thought-provoking and nuanced novel. I hope it flies off the shelves and sparks debate all over the country. I think it will. It's a thrill for us and a special kind of good luck charm for Suzanne that we have a legend to officially send this book out into the world, a living Australian literary legend indeed. And it's impossible to overstate the magnificence of our launcher tonight, and I'm trying to really embarrass him, and I hope I'm succeeding. As you know, Tom Keneally is, in the pantheon of great Australian writers, publishing more than 35 novels, 18 non-fiction works and several plays. He's the only author to win the Miles Franklin Award in 2 consecutive years for Bring Larks and Heroes and 3 Cheers for the Paraclete in 1967 and 1968. And as we all know, he won the Man Booker Prize for Schindler's Ark in 1982. Tom's works have been adapted into major award-winning films, noticeably Steven Spielberg's 1994 Academy Award for Best Picture winning Schindler's List and Fred Skepsi's 1978 adaptation of The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith. And his literary achievements have been recognised via multiple honorary titles, awards and fellowships. He's also an official Australian Living Treasure in capital letters trademark, and his face has appeared on a stamp. I don't know that you can get much more famous than that. And apart from all of that, he's one of the world's loveliest and funniest people, and it is a joy to have him here tonight to launch The Watchful Wife. Please welcome Tom Keneally.
Well.
Tom, do you need the microphone?
Thank you. And I've got to say that I think of the Cadigal tonight, particularly of Colby, in whom there's a novel, not as well known as Bennelong, but he's got a wonderful wife from somewhere round about Balmain, moved, and he's got the credit for having prevented a massacre. When, interestingly, Philip was speared over our way at Manly, we're going to launch the book, Suzanne. And maybe, this is so long-winded, maybe I should do it in Goff's accent. So, comrades. But he did, when Philip's gardener was ritually executed, by Pemulwuy, and the Marines were sent out with bags to bring heads back in, and Lieutenant Dawes would not go, and the others went unwillingly. They met Colby on the other side of a swamp just south of Sydney, and he came up and said, "Hey, you heard the latest?" And he tells a story about some romance in the convict population. And you can't kill a man and put his head in a bag who is gossiping with you. Or if you can, you don't know at which point the execution is supposed to take place. And so he diffused that terrible event, probably Philip's biggest mistake. So I'm sure the Cadigal are singing tonight, because there are still storytellers in the tribe of Sydney, and Suzanne is one of the most distinguished. It's been a great fun reading this book in between writing my turgid old geriatric prose, and it benefits hugely, of course, first off, from Suzanne's observations of the judicial system, from her own profession, and from her mother's profession, teaching, and all the wonderful things that Jane Palfreyman said, the adjectives she used. I've just forgotten, but they were splendid adjectives. It's a wonder. You know when you're old, but you're too hard put to plagiarise the previous speaker. This is a wonderful book deriving from those two professions. I'm grateful for the honour to launch Suzanne's book. I first contacted her over the Thursday Book Club. I've noticed with my daughter Meg, who has a new book just finished, and it's going to be published later this year, but Meg Keneally has so many women writers, whereas the blokes are all secretly, they don't make a show of it anymore. In my day, they used to make a gross show of it, but they're so far up themselves that they are lonely geniuses upon a peak. And some of them are, in fact, lonely and troubled geniuses on a peak, and some of them aren't. The ones most convinced of their talent aren't. But the women are cooperative, fraternal, sororal. They meet with each other socially at many opportunities. I know this because Meg and I are launching a book for Leah Kaminsky later this month, and she is a very fine writer from Melbourne. She's the way Suzanne is a lawyer, and why, if you got a law degree, why would you give it up to write a book? I can't understand that. You're already got golden employment, and you're going to really risk your soul and your income on a novel? What demon entered you, Suzanne? But we are the beneficiaries of whatever demon it was. But I first contacted her because of her Thursday Book Club, which was a sort of selfless extension, growing out of true love of books, of her generosity into convening an online book club every Thursday evening. And a number of you would belong to that online book club, I take it. Oh, great, yes. And this was a wonderful thing to do. There's nothing that cheers up a writer like meeting a few readers, because you have convinced yourself no one's read your book. I was telling Suzanne I wanted to bring along a little friend tonight called Lara from Manly, whose mother teaches me Pilates, or is trying to teach me. I'm a remedial Pilates student. And her little girl, I gave her Running with Ivan, the adolescent novel that Suzanne wrote, and it is a wonderful book, and they found her up at 5 o'clock one morning reading it. That wonderful experience of a book lighting up your entire world by introducing you to new dimensions and new avatars of yourself who are brave or resourceful. And so she is an excellent writer, and above all, an excellent narrator, because amongst the gifts of the writer, narration, it sort of comes in low in the marking stratagem, you know. The angle you get more points for the angle you enter the water at. But no, I'm just comparing it to diving, actually. But narration is a very important gift, and this is beautifully narrated and engrossingly narrated. Therefore, I've gone on to find that as well as being a generous soul, Suzanne is a very fine novelist as well. Of course, I read her subsequent to contacting her about her Thursday night club. This compelling and highly focused novel, it doesn't have a wide range of characters. It is told in a sophisticated, easeful sort of prose, which is very interesting. There are some writers and playwrights can do it who put in a simple sentence which resonates with 2 or 3 subtexts. And you can pick up the subtext from the simple, through a simple sentence such as, "I don't think we'll do that this week." Now, I'm not as good at doing that as my daughter Meg or as you, Suzanne. So there's you're ahead already. In your books, you give. Therefore, you give the subtext plenty of room to assert itself somehow. It's not you don't feel cheated, you don't feel that the language is impoverished, either in the prose passage, straight prose passages, or in dialogue. And the dialogue zaps along. It's one of the things, how does a writer do that? I think it's one of those things that are really a gift. That fairy godmothers give out to lucky kids, you know. This child shall be a narrator, says the fairy. It doesn't quite happen. I hate to disillusion you. It doesn't happen with fairy godmothers, but we are each given a collective unconscious with all the avatars, all the gods, all the drowned maidens, all the heroes, all Athena, every one of the great avatars of the human imagination are in there. Stereotypes, Jung called them. And they come out when you start writing and assert themselves. And I'm sure, are you what they call a pantser or a plotter? Yes, you're a plotter. Well, there's certainly a very tight narration, but I'm a pantser, you know, work out most writers are pantsers, too impatient to work out the book. And indeed, if they did work out the book before they, just pardon me, if they did work out the book plot, they would not be able to keep to it anyhow. those two phrases, pantser and plotter, belong to Anita Heiss, the very personable Wiradjuri woman, who's a very strong character. And so this is a book that benefits very much from Suzanne's observations of the judicial system, however, and it is one feels a great certainty in the way the author is, the reader is dealt with, because the reader generally turns up without being a specialist lawyer and without knowing the way courts operate. And so throughout this book there are a number of pleas for compassion for the partners, children, mothers, fathers of people labelled with a great crime. To be charged with a great crime is when it starts, according to this, that the relatives of the accused are treated differently from the relatives of the accuser. It is as if we have in us a primitive tendency to, once one member of another tribe goes bad and is accused of something big, the whole family suffers from a curtness and a suspicion and a dehumanization, which they feel profoundly as an extra grief on top of the shame their son or daughter or mother or father have brought them. And then on top of that, they carry the dread of what their boy or daughter is going to face, and they also find that they cannot approach, or they're inhibited from approaching people. And I think we are like this unless we're vigilant with ourselves, so that when she goes back to school after, when Ellen, the central character, goes back to school after her husband is found guilty, one woman puts her hand on her wrist and gives her some cookies, I think. But the other one says, "How could you not have known? How could you not have known?" And this is a question I've met fellows I was in the seminary with. Boy, it's good to be in a church that doesn't have bleeding saints everywhere. Don't you reckon, Aidan? This is my Irish friend, Aidan. He's in a Protestant church for the first time. And look, they're just like us. I've mentioned the nature of the prose. Well, now, Ellen, the wife, is raised in what we call a cult. And I wonder about cults. I wonder if they're not just small versions of the big religions. Because I found myself the other day, my GP said, got to get rid of religious schools, go back, they don't have them in, they don't have as many religious schools. Well, we do have a lot of religious schools in Australia, but you won't agree with this, Aidan, but you can cool your jets. He said, "Why did all you guys go to those Catholic schools?" And I said, "Because the priests denied the sacraments to anyone who didn't. I mean, we're in danger of meeting Protestants, of studying with Protestants, of meeting shapely Methodists and Presbyterian heretics. Therefore, we were denied, our parents were denied the sacraments, which is one of the, but that is very sect-like, isn't it? It's very like the extremism of the sect. And this is a very extreme sect in that Ellen is bound from girlhood, from young girlhood, to marry within the sect. And as she hits adolescence, she looks a few of the old guys over, the available partners, and finds them less than ample in gifts, let's say. And yet there is a wonderful passage about the impact of how the child wonders about the phenomenon of their serious religion. It always makes good lines. It worked out well for James Joyce in Portrait of the Artist. Unlike the empty walls of our church, you know, this'll, if there's some good congregation in this will scare you. In the church near NYU, where we lived, near New York University, where we used to live a number of years, for about half the year, there was a church called St. Anthony of Padua. They call it Padua, not Padua. Anyhow, there is in the Catholic Church there, a saint, a Sicilian saint, and he's glorious and colourful, and he's got a dog beside him and a bandage on his leg, and it's bleeding, you know. We tykes don't do things by halves, you know, particularly the Italians. And his name is Saint Rocco. Can you imagine having a statue of Saint Rocco in here? An astonishing phenomenon. But anyhow, you were saved from all that if you grew up in the other tradition. And Saint Rocco is really the patron saint of rabies. The dog at his feet was rabid, but he, through his faith, reduced the dog to non-rabid. This is a bacteriological phenomenon, miracle. And his leg's okay, it's just a bit of a scratch. He'll be playing next Saturday again. And it's wonderful to see these biographies on the wall, which is something the Anglicans do too. A few years ago, I wrote a book on Napoleon, and we went to St. Helena on a steamer. And to read the plaques of the English folk who died in St. Helena, you know, often just while their ship was there, is a phenomenal, every one of them is a novel. Every one of them is a novel. And I'm sure that's true of these guys. Mr. Fairfax. Boy, I'm with my betters. Unlike the empty walls of our church, those in our Sabbath schoolroom were adorned with the prophets. Moses stuck in the wilderness, Abraham holding the knife to the throat of his son, and David fighting the monstrous Goliath. But of all the prophets stuck to the wall, John the Baptist was my favourite at the sight of his head on a platter. I missed him, I really did. The passing of John the Baptist was, of course, a sober reminder of the problem with birthdays. After all, hadn't Pharaoh marked his by killing his baker, and King Herod by beheading my favourite prophet? Tangible proof of how much God disapproves of birthdays, perhaps even more than he hates Christmas and Easter. And so on the day I turned 10 and so on, that's charming writing, but it has an irony to it, which accounts for the child, it accounts for the sect that her parents are a member of. But it is a very humane voice behind it all. There are many passages of that nature with that same humane voice, and just a couple more and you're going to be free. I'm nearly finished. although we don't have to rush, do we, comrade? The romance is beautifully related, thank you. And thank you. And as I said, but I shan't read that. I've just got a few places from early in the book to read. This is what I mean by subtext. There are many things being said here between the mother. It's when she goes to school and she makes friends with a fashionable girl, bourgeois girl, of no, certainly not a member of a sect. And she brings her home and they meet the mother. Does she bring her home? I should have read it more. So. Anyhow, call me Sandy, said the mother. Yes. Yvette's mother, whose name was Sandra and whose hair was yellow, had a very smooth face, somewhat darker than her neck. Her lips were painted bright red, harlot red, while her eyeshadow matched her blue eyes. Call me Sandy, she said to my mother, but my mother did not. For the occasion, my mother had dressed in her grey serge skirt and a white poplin shirt with a removable grey serge collar. Her hair was parted and clipped, as usual, into a very low bun. That's a conversation already taking place via people's appearance. And it is a tragedy that the two parents diverge because the child knows that there's no future in this relationship, as much as she would like it there to be. And I think I'll let it go at that because with all due respect to your prose, Suzanne, this is a compelling and highly focused novel told in that sophisticatedly easy, casual prose. And the every conversation speaks volumes that are quite apparent to you from the dialogue that occurs, as in that last passage. And I do hope that this pleasurable, amiable, deft, well-directed, narrated story of yours helps your career greatly along, Suzanne. You've got lots of time, and it would, I'm sure that the career would take on new dimensions with this book and build your career already estimable to a critical consensus on your skills, and thus confirm your future. And amidst all your works, may the Watchful Wife always have honourable company. Anthony Burgess said he always hoped his novels would last 10 years, and that's what he aimed at, in 10 years in paperback. That's a pretty long time in paperback these days. I hope there'll be people reading it in 20 years' time and saying, what a bloody good novel. What a good novel.
Well, my 10-year-old self had never imagined that might have just happened. Thank you very much, Tom. Tom has long been one of my heroes. He has the most wonderful way of wielding words, and he has the most wonderful generosity towards other writers, as you've just seen. It's been a delight to get to know him and Judy, and I'm so delighted that he agreed to launch The Watchful Wife. It's funny, I was running this morning, or my husband would say not quite running, but almost running, and I was listening to The Fanatic Heart, which is one of Tom's recent books, and which I'll be interviewing him about later this year. And I was, running along, and then my phone rang. I looked down, and it said Thomas Keneally. I thought, that's very strange. And sure enough, it was Tom ringing while I was listening to Tom. So the world goes round. I'm not going to be very long. I'm just going to thank you all for coming. It's a beautiful venue here. Pitt Street's got something for everybody. I was married here. A number of children I have were baptised here. My father's funeral was here, and church is here. And it's a wonderfully safe, inclusive place. And quite frankly, I've done almost nothing for this launch today because everyone took care of everything. The banner, the food. Well, the food I sort of organised with Cynthia, but it's a really lovely community. And Cynthia Coghill has been fantastic with all the organising. John Floyd, Orange KO has been doing the video, and Hazel Hogarth the phones, the cameras, and John and Robin Floyd have been basically doing everything. So thank you very much. We have some excellent people at the bar, including Xavier Leal-Smith, my son, and India Birrell, and I think we had Denise Chapman, who has been my best friend since I was 7, and anybody else I've missed. We have Miranda Barrow, 4th child, and Layla Ray, who have been responsible for the cupcakes, which are yet to come, and thank you very much for that. It takes a village to make a book, as many of you writers and perhaps readers will also know. And Jane Palfreyman is the head of that village. She's a magnificent publisher, and she makes you work for it. She makes you work for your novel, but the novel is so much the better for it. And I'm so honoured to be in such a fine stable of writers and to have Jane's trust. Margaret Connolly is my agent, and she's terrific, and I call her about the most ridiculously micromanaging things. I send her emails that I'm not sure whether I should send or not, and she manages it somehow. I'm wondering whether perhaps she might slowly block me, but not yet. Ali Laveau did the structural edit for The Watchful Wife, which I, with some arrogance, was expecting to be a sort of a walk in the park, but it was a 22-page detailed commentary of what needed to happen, and she was right. And it's made the book so much better for it. Krista Munns did the copy edit, and she worked with me on the couple of overnighters I had to do to make my deadline, and she was terrific. Pamela Dunn was the copy editor. Jennifer Thurgate has been a fantastic intermediary during this. Genevieve Buzo, Odette Drewlers. Sam Ryan's been a terrific publicist. It's always fabulous to have someone on your side as a publicist who is so much fun and who you'd like to be your friend anyway. Sarah Barrett is the same. She's been a terrific marketer. The cover, which is pretty... so on the book you'll see the eye doesn't... You don't see the eye, so it's just below the eye. But it's a terrific cover, and it really stands out, and it's mysterious, and Alyssa Dinallo, who did The Teacher's Secret, has done that one, and it's terrific. Sandra Boy... is the foreign rights and audio rights for Allen Unwin, and she secured the audio rights for The Watchful Wife, and Anthea Greco is the narrator, and she's excellent. After I've written a book, I always find it a bit tricky to read it because you're just looking for mistakes, and you think, wish I'd give me another go at that. But when someone's reading it to you and it's not you, it's like it's not even your book, and I sort of was running with it, and I thought, this is good. And it's because it gives you a distance, and she does a beautiful job with it. There are people who I relied on for specialist knowledge. Reverend Anne Ryan read the manuscript and gave me information about the fairly austere Protestant church that I describe in the Watchful Wife, quite different to this one. And Kate Nichol is a theological expert and also sewing expert, and as Ellen is also a sewer, that was two for the price of one. Patrick Bowe is Irish, and a couple of my characters are Irish Catholics, and so Patrick checked that for me. There was a number of writers who gave comments for the book or gave blurbs, and it's quite a lot to ask of writers. So, they're often busy, and particularly if they're prominent, they've got a lot of demands on them. And so when you send the manuscript and say, you know what, can you give me a blurb? It's always a hard thing to do, and often the publisher does it for you, but you work together. And all to say, thank you very much to Jock Sarong, to Mark Brandy, to Jane Caro, to Jacqueline Bublitz, and to Jack Beaumont for their beautiful comments. I had my makeup done today by my niece, Suzanne Leal, who's done an excellent job. And I'd like to thank Carol for being there as well, my sister-in-law, my brother, David Leal, who's always here, and my mother, who's also done her hair and her makeup today. And as Tom said, she's been a teacher, and I've grown up in a family of teachers and spent many years at schools, and it continues to fascinate me. My dad died about 6 years ago, but if I write well, it's a lot because of him. He was a intellectual man who wrote with great simplicity, and I'm hoping that's how I'm writing. Tom mentioned Thursday Book Club, and it's a funny thing. It was one of those panicky things in COVID that I started and thought, well, what do? I had this new book out, and there were no bookshops open, no one was in the streets, no one was reading about the Holocaust particularly. And so I had this, and I talked to this friend who, she said, you've got to do something online. She said, what can you do? And I said, not much. I said, I can talk. So I started this book club, and that was 3 years ago, and we meet once a week. There's a newsletter. There are people here, in fact, all together in a row. Hey, there we go. There's the Thursday Book Club row. And it's been a really lovely way to meet people, often strangers, who you don't meet in person, but because you meet almost like a church, once a week, you get to know them. So we followed people through successes, we followed people through the death of their spouses and beyond as they regroup, and it's been special, and I'm really glad that I've had the support. Katrina Davis does a review every week for me. Abby's has been terrific because I get the recommendations. It's been really a cooperative involvement, and I'm delighted by that. Okay, so everyone who's come, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming out in the winter to this place. It's lovely to see you, and I hope I can talk to you afterwards. The kids, Alex and Dominic, are off on their way. I think they're both up the north coast somewhere at the moment. Xavier has been fantastic with his help, as has Miranda and also Layla. And of course, David Barrow, who is my husband and also my first reader, and also the one who you can blame if there's anything wrong with the legal stuff, because he read it through and said, no. David has been a bit of magic in my life. He's been magic for our children, and he carries himself with a humility that I never quite manage, and it's great to have him living with me. And so now I think we should, now if there's anyone I forgot, sorry, and I'll remember later and perhaps send you an email. Christian, thank you Christian for selling the books, and Craig for being here. And after we finish tonight, I think about 8 or so, I've booked some tables at Namaste, which is just the Nepali place across the road. So if you'd like to kick on, come and join us. And that's it.